What if I told you that our ancestors slept twice every night, woke up in the middle of darkness to have sex, pray, or commit crimes, and that this wasn't madness but the most natural thing in the world? What if the 8-hour sleep we desperately chase today is actually a modern invention that goes against thousands of years of human evolution? Tonight, when you struggle to fall asleep or wake up at 3 a.m. feeling like something's wrong with you, remember this. You might be experiencing the ghost of humanity's ancient sleep pattern, fighting to resurface through centuries of suppression. The story of how we sleep is the story of civilization itself. Every advancement in human society, from the discovery of fire to the invention of the light bulb, fundamentally alter not just how we live, but how we rest. And the deeper we dig into this buried history, the more we realize that modern sleep disorders, insomnia, and that mysterious 3 a.m. awakening might not be problems to solve, but ancient rhythms trying to reassert themselves in a world that no longer understands their purpose. Picture this: a cave in southern France, 40,000 years ago. The last light of day fades behind jagged rocks, and our ancestors gather around flickering flames. But here's what's shocking: they don't sleep the way you think they do. As darkness falls, they don't retreat to their primitive beds for 8 uninterrupted hours. Instead, they enter what historians now call the first sleep, a deep slumber that lasts only 4 to 5 hours. Then, in the dead of night, they wake up naturally, as if summoned by some internal clock that modern humans have forgotten how to hear. This wasn't insomnia. This wasn't a disorder. This was segmented sleep, and it was as natural to our ancestors as breathing. During these midnight hours, they would tend the fire, check for predators, engage in intimate conversations with their partners, or simply lie in the darkness, contemplating the mysteries of existence. They called this period the watching, and it was sacred time, when the conscious and unconscious mind danced together in ways that our always-on modern world has made impossible. The cave walls that surrounded them weren't just shelter, they were humanity's first bedrooms, and the sleeping arrangements tell a story of survival that's both brutal and beautiful. Families huddled together not just for warmth, but for protection. Children slept pressed against their parents, absorbing not just body heat, but the rhythm of adult breathing, the steady heartbeat that meant safety in a world where darkness brought very real threats. The sleeping positions weren't random, they were strategic. The strongest members of the group slept closest to the cave entrance, ready to defend against whatever might emerge from the night. But even more fascinating is what they slept on. Forget the Hollywood image of cavemen sleeping on bare rock. Archaeological evidence reveals that our ancestors were surprisingly sophisticated in their approach to comfort. They created the world's first mattresses from layers of grass, leaves, and animal hides. In some caves, researchers have found evidence of sleeping areas that were carefully maintained, with fresh bedding materials replaced regularly. They understood something we've forgotten, that the quality of sleep directly affected their chances of survival. The truly revolutionary discovery came when archaeologists realized that these ancient sleeping areas weren't just functional, they were ritualistic. Certain caves show evidence of specific sleeping positions aligned with lunar cycles, suggesting that our ancestors understood the connection between celestial bodies and human sleep patterns thousands of years before modern science confirmed it. They slept with their heads pointing towards specific directions, rotated their sleeping positions with the seasons, and even used particular stones and crystals around their sleeping areas, believing these minerals could influence their dreams and protect them during their most vulnerable hours. As the Ice Age ended and humans began to migrate, sleep became mobile. The nomadic tribes that spread across continents carried with them not just tools and weapons, but sophisticated knowledge about sleep that would make modern sleep experts envious. They could read the land like a book, identifying the perfect sleeping spots based on wind patterns, ground temperature, and even the behavior of local animals. A slight depression in the earth that provided protection from wind, a location near water but not too close to attract predators, ground that was soft enough for comfort but firm enough to quickly escape if needed. These traveling sleepers developed what we might call the warrior's rest, a form of sleep so light that they could spring into action at the first sign of danger, yet deep enough to provide genuine restoration. They trained their minds to sleep in shifts, with different members of the group taking turns in light and deep sleep, creating a network of consciousness that never fully shut down. This wasn't just survival strategy, it was the beginning of organized society, where trust and cooperation during the most vulnerable hours created bonds that would last lifetimes. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. As humans settled into the first permanent villages, something unexpected happened to their sleep. The natural segmented pattern that had served them for millennia began to change, not because of evolution, but because of fear. In these early settlements, night brought new terrors. Unlike the predictable dangers of the wild, village life introduced human threats, thieves, raiders, and the complex social dynamics that come with permanent neighbors. Sleep became a luxury that not everyone could afford equally. The first social hierarchies emerged partly around who could sleep safely and who had to stay alert. The village leaders, the warriors, the shamans, they enjoyed the deepest sleep, protected by others who took turns watching. But this protection came at a cost. The watchers, the guards, the servants, they began to develop what we now recognize as chronic sleep deprivation, the first occupational hazard of civilization. The village sleeping arrangements revealed the birth of privacy and its impact on human rest. For the first time in human history, families began sleeping in separate spaces, divided by walls, curtains, or simple partitions. This change, which seems so natural to us now, was revolutionary and not entirely positive. Children who had always slept in the comforting presence of their entire community now faced the darkness alone or with just their immediate family. The communal breathing, the shared warmth, the collective security, all of this began to fragment. Yet villages also brought the first real beds. Not just piles of natural materials, but constructed sleeping platforms raised off the ground, stuffed with carefully selected materials, covered with woven fabrics. These weren't just furniture, they were status symbols, indicators of wealth and social position. The higher your bed, the higher your status. The softer your mattress, the more secure your position in the community. Sleep was becoming commodified, turned into a marker of success rather than a universal human need. But perhaps the most profound change was the emergence of dream culture in these early settlements. With more security and comfort, people began to sleep more deeply, and with deeper sleep came more vivid dreams. The village shamans, the wise women, the spiritual leaders, they became the first dream interpreters, creating elaborate systems of meaning around the visions that came in the night. Dreams weren't just random neural firing, they were messages from the gods, glimpses of the future, communications from the ancestors. This is when sleep became truly mysterious, charged with spiritual significance that would influence human culture for thousands of years. The sleeping person wasn't just resting, they were traveling to other worlds, receiving wisdom, battling demons, or communing with the divine. The bed became an altar, the bedroom a sacred space, and sleep itself a form of prayer or meditation. As villages grew into cities, the complexity of sleep multiplied exponentially. The first urban dwellers faced challenges that their ancestors could never have imagined. Noise pollution from neighbors, animals, and early industry. Light pollution from torches, fires, and oil lamps that burned through the night. Air pollution from cooking fires and primitive manufacturing. But most significantly, they faced time pollution, the artificial creation of schedules and routines that ignored natural circadian rhythms. The ancient cities of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley reveal sophisticated approaches to managing urban sleep. They developed the first zoning laws, separating noisy commercial areas from quiet residential districts. They created the first noise ordinances, limiting certain activities during sleeping hours. They even developed early forms of urban planning that considered wind patterns and sun exposure to optimize sleeping conditions for different neighborhoods. But with urbanism came the first major disruption to the ancient segmented sleep pattern. City life demanded more regular schedules, more predictable routines. The natural rhythm of sleeping, waking, and sleeping again became incompatible with urban commerce, governance, and social organization. The wealthy adapted by hiring night guards and servants, maintaining their segmented sleep, while others provided security. The poor, however, were forced to adapt to new patterns that fought against millions of years of evolution. The ancient Egyptians, masters of both luxury and practicality, elevated sleep to an art form. Their sleeping arrangements weren't just about comfort, they were about magic, medicine, and social control. The pharaohs slept on beds that were works of art, inlaid with gold and precious stones, designed not just for rest but for the spiritual journey the soul was believed to take each night. These beds were oriented according to complex astronomical calculations, positioned to align the sleeper with beneficial cosmic forces. But the real genius of Egyptian sleep culture lay in their understanding of climate control. Living in a desert environment, they developed sophisticated techniques for keeping sleeping areas cool and comfortable. They used the world's first air conditioning systems, with channels that directed cool air from underground chambers into bedrooms. They created bedding from linen that was specifically woven to promote airflow and wick away moisture. They even developed the first adjustable beds, with movable sections that could be positioned to catch cooling breezes or avoid them depending on the season. The Egyptian approach to sleep was holistic, involving diet, exercise, meditation, and even primitive forms of sleep therapy. They understood that sleep problems were often symptoms of deeper issues: physical, emotional, or spiritual. Their medical papyri contain detailed instructions for treating various sleep disorders, using combinations of herbs, rituals, and lifestyle changes that modern sleep medicine is only beginning to appreciate. Yet even in Egypt, sleep was becoming stratified. The elaborate sleeping arrangements of the elite contrasted sharply with the simple mats and basic shelters of the poor. This wasn't just inequality, it was the beginning of sleep as a marker of social status, a trend that would continue throughout history and persist into our modern era. The ancient Greeks transformed sleep from a purely practical necessity into a subject of philosophical inquiry. They were the first to ask not just how to sleep better, but why we sleep at all, what happens to consciousness during sleep, and what our dreams mean for our understanding of reality itself. The Greek physicians, particularly Hippocrates, developed the first systematic approaches to sleep medicine, identifying connections between sleep patterns and physical health that wouldn't be scientifically proven until the 20th century. Greek sleeping arrangements reflected their democratic ideals while maintaining practical distinctions. In Athens, even wealthy citizens slept in relatively simple accommodations, emphasizing function over ostentation. The Greek bed, or klein, was designed for multiple uses: sleeping, dining, and socializing. This versatility reflected the Greek understanding that rest wasn't separate from life but integrated into it. But the Greeks also introduced something revolutionary: the idea that sleep could be optimized through training and discipline. Greek athletes followed strict sleep regimens as part of their training, understanding that rest was as important as exercise for peak performance. Greek scholars developed sleep schedules designed to enhance learning and memory, discovering principles that modern sleep research has confirmed. They were the first to systematically study the relationship between sleep and creativity, noting that many important insights came during the transition between sleep and waking. The Greek approach to dreams was equally sophisticated. They established dream temples, where people would come to sleep in sacred spaces, hoping to receive healing or guidance through their dreams. These weren't just religious rituals, they were early forms of sleep therapy, providing controlled environments where people could address sleep problems and explore the deeper meanings of their nocturnal experiences. However, Greek society also began to view excessive sleep as a moral failing, a sign of laziness or lack of discipline. This judgment, which seems harsh to our modern understanding of sleep as a biological necessity, reflected the Greek emphasis on rationality and self-control. Sleep was necessary, but it should be efficient, purposeful, and moderate. This attitude would influence Western thinking about sleep for centuries. The Romans took Greek sleep culture and industrialized it, creating the first mass market for sleep-related products and services. Roman cities featured specialized craftsmen who made beds, mattresses, pillows, and bedding. They developed the first sleep-related retail industry, with shops dedicated entirely to products for the bedroom. They even created the first hotels, inns, and guest houses designed specifically to provide quality sleep for travelers. Roman engineering revolutionized urban sleeping conditions. Their aqueduct systems provided running water for cleaning and cooling. Their hypo-cost heating systems allowed for climate-controlled bedrooms. Their architectural innovations included the first private bedrooms in middle-class homes, giving ordinary citizens a level of sleep privacy that had previously been available only to the elite. But Roman sleep culture also revealed the dark side of urban civilization. The crowded insulae, the apartment buildings where the poor lived, were notorious for their noise, smoke, and general unsuitability for quality rest. The wealthy Romans enjoyed elaborate bedrooms with multiple beds for different seasons, while the poor slept in shifts, sharing beds and even sleeping spaces. The contrast was stark and deliberate, part of a social system that used access to quality sleep as a form of control. The Romans were also the first to truly commercialize sleep, turning it into a commodity that could be bought and sold. They developed the first luxury bedding industry, creating mattresses stuffed with exotic materials, pillows filled with rare feathers, and sheets woven from the finest fabrics. They imported sleeping aids from across their empire, herbs, oils, and even primitive sleeping potions designed to enhance rest. Yet perhaps the most significant Roman contribution to sleep history was their systematization of time. The Roman calendar, with its regular divisions of days, weeks, and months, created the first standardized sleep schedules. This was both a blessing and a curse. It provided predictability and social coordination, but it also severed the last connections between human sleep and natural rhythms. As the Roman Empire declined, sleep became a refuge from an increasingly chaotic world. The late imperial period saw the development of elaborate sleep rituals, as people tried to create order and meaning in their private lives even as public life disintegrated. The wealthy Romans of this era slept in rooms that were virtually shrines, surrounded by art, music, and luxury that provided psychological comfort in uncertain times. The collapse of Rome marked the beginning of what many historians call the Dark Ages, but for sleep, this period was surprisingly innovative. Without the Roman infrastructure of urban planning and climate control, people had to rediscover and reinvent sleeping arrangements that worked in a more primitive but also more natural environment. Medieval sleep was communal in ways that modern people can barely imagine. Entire families slept in single rooms, often in the same bed. Guests, servants, and even strangers might share sleeping spaces. Privacy was rare, and the idea of individual bedrooms was almost unknown outside of monasteries and the highest levels of nobility. This wasn't just poverty, it was a different understanding of what sleep was for. The medieval bed was a fortress, designed to provide protection from cold, drafts, and unwanted intrusions. The great bed, surrounded by heavy curtains and built like a room within a room, created a private world within the communal sleeping space. These beds weren't just furniture, they were architecture, carefully designed to create optimal sleeping conditions in homes that were otherwise cold, drafty, and uncomfortable. But medieval sleep was also dangerous. Fire was a constant threat, with candles, oil lamps, and hearth fires creating risks that could turn a peaceful night into a disaster. Theft was common, with sleeping people vulnerable to robbery or assault. Disease spread rapidly in the close quarters of medieval sleeping arrangements, and the lack of sanitation created health risks that made sleep itself a gamble. The medieval church had a complex relationship with sleep. On one hand, religious authorities promoted regular sleep schedules, understanding that well-rested people were more capable of spiritual devotion. On the other hand, they viewed excessive sleep as sinful, a form of sloth that distracted from religious duties. The monastic communities developed some of the most sophisticated sleep schedules in medieval Europe, with carefully timed periods of rest and waking that supported both physical health and spiritual practice. Medieval dreams carried enormous cultural weight. They were seen as messages from God, warnings from saints, or temptations from demons. The interpretation of dreams became a specialized skill, with religious authorities and scholars developing elaborate systems for understanding nocturnal visions. Sleep wasn't just rest, it was a form of divine communication, making the sleeping person a conduit between the earthly and spiritual realms. The castle, that iconic symbol of medieval power, was also a sleep innovation. Castle bedrooms were among the first private sleeping spaces for the nobility, with thick walls that provided both security and sound dampening. The castle's height offered protection from ground-level threats, while its design created multiple layers of defense that allowed the inhabitants to sleep with relative peace of mind. Castle sleeping arrangements revealed the paranoia of medieval leadership. The lord's bedroom was typically located in the most secure part of the castle, accessible only through multiple checkpoints. Secret passages allowed for quick escape during attacks, while hidden chambers provided alternative sleeping spaces if the main bedroom was compromised. Sleep, for the medieval elite, was a military operation. But castles also featured some of the most luxurious sleeping accommodations of the medieval period. Elaborate beds with carved posts and expensive hangings, imported mattresses stuffed with rare materials, and even primitive forms of climate control using thick walls and strategic window placement. The contrast between the lord's bedroom and the sleeping quarters of servants and soldiers was stark, reflecting the rigid social hierarchies of medieval society. The development of medieval towns brought new challenges and opportunities for sleep. Unlike the rural manor or the isolated castle, towns were noisy, crowded, and active at all hours. The first urban noise ordinances were created to protect sleep, limiting certain activities during nighttime hours. Town planning began to consider sleeping needs, with residential areas separated from commercial and industrial zones. Medieval craftsmen developed specialized skills in sleep-related trades. The mattress maker, the bed carpenter, the textile weaver who created bed hangings, these became respected professions with their own guilds and traditions. The quality of sleep was becoming a measure of social status, with elaborate beds serving as symbols of wealth and power. Yet medieval sleep was also communal in ways that created strong social bonds. Families who slept together developed intimate knowledge of each other's rhythms, needs, and vulnerabilities. The shared vulnerability of sleep created trust and affection that extended into waking life. Children learned to sleep by absorbing the patterns of their parents and siblings, creating family sleep cultures that were passed down through generations. The medieval period also saw the development of the first sleep disorders as recognized medical conditions. Medieval physicians identified various forms of insomnia, nightmares, and sleepwalking, developing treatments that combined herbal remedies, lifestyle changes, and spiritual practices. They understood that sleep problems were often symptoms of deeper issues, requiring comprehensive approaches that addressed the whole person. As the medieval period gave way to the Renaissance, sleep began to change in fundamental ways. The Renaissance emphasis on individualism started to transform communal sleeping arrangements. The wealthy began to demand private bedrooms, separate beds, and sleeping arrangements that reflected their personal preferences rather than family or community needs. Renaissance art and literature reveal a new fascination with sleep as a subject worthy of artistic attention. Painters depicted sleeping figures with unprecedented realism and emotional depth. Writers explored the psychology of sleep, dreams, and the boundary between consciousness and unconsciousness. Sleep was becoming not just a biological necessity, but a cultural phenomenon. The Renaissance bedroom became a work of art in itself. Elaborate bed frames carved by master craftsmen, textiles woven with precious metals, and furnishings that rivaled the finest public spaces. The bedroom was no longer just a place to sleep, it was a statement of taste, wealth, and cultural sophistication. But Renaissance sleep was also influenced by new ideas about time and productivity. The emerging capitalist economy demanded more regular schedules, more predictable routines. The natural rhythms of segmented sleep began to conflict with the artificial demands of commerce and industry. The wealthy could still afford to maintain traditional sleep patterns, but the growing merchant class and urban workers were forced to adapt to new schedules that prioritized economic efficiency over biological needs. Renaissance medicine brought new understanding of sleep's role in health. Physicians began to study sleep systematically, developing theories about its function and importance. They identified connections between sleep and memory, creativity, and emotional well-being that wouldn't be scientifically proven until centuries later. The Renaissance approach to sleep was holistic, considering the interaction between mind, body, and environment. The Renaissance also marked the beginning of sleep as a luxury commodity. The wealthy competed to create the most elaborate and comfortable sleeping environments, importing exotic materials and employing skilled craftsmen to create beds that were works of art. Sleep was becoming commercialized, turned into a marker of status and refinement. As we moved into the early modern period, sleep faced its first major technological disruption. The invention of the mechanical clock created artificial time, severing the last connections between human sleep and natural rhythms. The clock didn't just measure time, it began to control it, creating schedules and routines that ignored the body's natural inclinations. The early modern period also saw the rise of coffee and tea, substances that could artificially extend waking hours and suppress the natural desire for sleep. These weren't just beverages, they were technologies that allowed people to override their biological programming, creating the first chemically enhanced productivity culture. Urban growth in the early modern period created new challenges for sleep. Cities became noisier, more polluted, and more crowded. The night shift worker appeared for the first time, people whose jobs required them to stay awake when their bodies demanded sleep. The natural rhythm of day and night began to blur as human activity extended into all hours. The early modern bedroom reflected changing social values. Privacy became increasingly important, with separate bedrooms for different family members. The marital bedroom became a symbol of the nuclear family, while children's bedrooms reflected new ideas about childhood as a distinct life stage requiring special care and protection. Early modern sleep was also shaped by religious and philosophical changes. The Protestant work ethic viewed excessive sleep as morally suspect, promoting the idea that sleep should be minimized in favor of productive activity. This attitude created guilt and anxiety around sleep that persists in modern culture, turning rest from a natural biological function into a moral issue. The Industrial Revolution marked the most dramatic transformation in human sleep patterns since the development of agriculture. The factory system demanded regular schedules that completely ignored natural circadian rhythms. Workers were forced to wake and sleep according to the needs of machinery rather than their own biological clocks. Industrial sleeping arrangements reflected the harsh realities of factory life. Workers crowded into boarding houses, sharing beds and sleeping in shifts. The quality of sleep declined dramatically as people tried to rest in noisy, polluted, and overcrowded conditions. Sleep became a luxury that many could no longer afford. But the Industrial Revolution also created the first mass-produced sleeping technologies. Factory-made mattresses, pillows, and bedding became available to ordinary people for the first time. The standardization of bed sizes and bedding created a new consumer market for sleep-related products. The industrial city was hostile to sleep in ways that pre-industrial settlements had never been. Noise pollution from factories, trains, and industrial activity made quiet sleep almost impossible. Air pollution from coal burning and industrial processes created health problems that interfered with rest. Light pollution from gas lamps and industrial fires disrupted natural circadian rhythms. Industrial workers developed new forms of sleep disorders directly related to their working conditions. Shift work sleep disorder, industrial insomnia, and occupational sleep deprivation became common problems. The human cost of industrial progress was measured not just in workplace injuries, but in the systematic destruction of natural sleep patterns. Yet the industrial period also saw the first scientific study of sleep. Researchers began to measure and analyze sleep systematically, developing theories about its function and importance. The industrial approach to sleep was mechanistic, viewing rest as a form of maintenance required to keep human workers functioning efficiently. The Victorian era brought new anxieties about sleep and new technologies designed to address them. The Victorian bedroom became a temple of hygiene and moral purity, with elaborate rules about ventilation, bedding, and sleeping positions designed to promote both physical and spiritual health. Victorian sleep culture was shaped by new understandings of disease transmission and public health. The bedroom became a medical space, with prescribed arrangements designed to prevent illness and promote recovery. The Victorian approach to sleep was scientific but also deeply moral, reflecting beliefs about the connection between physical rest and spiritual well-being. The Victorian period also saw the development of sleep as a consumer experience. Department stores featured elaborate bedroom displays, mail-order catalogs offered a wide variety of sleep-related products, and advertising began to promote specific brands of mattresses, pillows, and bedding. Sleep was becoming fully commercialized, transformed from a natural biological function into a market opportunity. Victorian literature and art reflected new anxieties about sleep and dreams. Gothic novels explored the dark side of the unconscious mind, while medical texts warned of the dangers of improper sleep. The Victorian imagination was haunted by fears of what might happen during the vulnerable hours of rest. As the 19th century ended and the 20th began, sleep was about to face its most dramatic transformation yet. The invention of electric lighting would eliminate the natural cycle of day and night that had governed human sleep for millions of years. The modern world was about to declare war on darkness itself, and sleep would be the first casualty. The electric light bulb, innocent as it seemed, was actually a weapon of mass destruction aimed at the ancient patterns of human rest. When Thomas Edison flipped that first switch, he didn't just illuminate the darkness, he obliterated the natural rhythm that had governed human sleep since the dawn of our species. The segmented sleep pattern that had persisted for millennia began to collapse within a single generation. The early 20th century sleep culture was shaped by a paradox. Technology promised to make sleep more comfortable and convenient, but it also created unprecedented disruptions to natural rest patterns. Electric heating and cooling systems allowed for climate-controlled bedrooms, but electric lighting extended the day far beyond its natural limits. The first sleep studies of the 20th century revealed something alarming. Modern humans were getting less sleep and lower quality rest than their ancestors. The 8-hour sleep schedule that we now consider normal was actually a compromise, a way to fit biological needs into industrial schedules. The natural segmented sleep pattern was being suppressed, creating new forms of sleep disorders and psychological distress. World War I marked a turning point in sleep culture. The war demanded round-the-clock activity, with soldiers forced to sleep in trenches, foxholes, and other impossible conditions. The trauma of war created new forms of sleep disorders, including what we now recognize as PTSD-related insomnia and nightmares. The war also accelerated the development of stimulants and sedatives, as military forces sought chemical solutions to the problem of managing sleep and wakefulness. The post-war period saw the emergence of the modern bedroom as we know it today. The suburban home featured private bedrooms for parents and children, with standardized furniture and mass-produced bedding. The bedroom became a symbol of middle-class prosperity and domestic stability. But the modern bedroom also became a battleground between natural biology and artificial scheduling. The alarm clock, that seemingly innocent device, became an instrument of torture, forcing people to wake up according to external demands rather than internal rhythms. The snooze button, invented as a mercy, actually made the problem worse by fragmenting the final stages of sleep. The mid-20th century brought new understanding of sleep through scientific research, but also new disruptions through technological innovation. Television extended evening activities far into the night, while air conditioning allowed people to sleep comfortably in climates that had previously enforced seasonal sleep patterns. The discovery of REM sleep in the 1950s revolutionized scientific understanding of rest, revealing that sleep wasn't just a passive state but an active process essential for memory consolidation, emotional processing, and mental health. This discovery should have led to greater respect for sleep, but instead it was often used to justify further manipulation of natural sleep patterns. The pharmaceutical industry began to view sleep as a market opportunity, developing a wide range of sleeping pills and wake-promoting drugs. These substances promised to solve sleep problems, but they often created new dependencies and side effects. The medicalization of sleep turned a natural biological function into a medical condition requiring professional treatment. The late 20th century saw the emergence of sleep disorders as a major public health issue. Sleep apnea, insomnia, restless leg syndrome, and other conditions became epidemic, affecting millions of people who might have slept perfectly well in pre-industrial environments. The modern lifestyle was creating sleep problems faster than medicine could solve them. The 24-hour economy of the late 20th century demanded workers who could function at all hours, leading to the rise of shift work and the night shift as permanent features of modern life. This created a new class of workers whose sleep patterns were in constant conflict with their circadian rhythms, leading to chronic health problems and reduced life expectancy. The bedroom of the late 20th century became a complex technological environment, filled with devices designed to monitor, control, and optimize sleep. Sleep trackers, white noise machines, and climate control systems promised better rest but often created new forms of anxiety and obsession with sleep performance. As we entered the 21st century, the digital revolution brought the most serious threat to sleep since the invention of electric lighting. Smartphones, tablets, and computers introduced blue light directly into the bedroom, disrupting melatonin production and making it harder to fall asleep. The always-on nature of digital communication meant that the bedroom was no longer a sanctuary from the demands of work and social interaction. Social media created new forms of sleep anxiety, as people compared their rest to others and worried about missing out on nighttime activities. The fear of missing out, or FOMO, extended into sleep itself, with people staying awake longer to maintain their online presence and social connections. The modern sleep industry has become a multi-billion-dollar market, offering everything from high-tech mattresses to sleep coaching services. This commercialization of sleep has created new pressures and expectations, turning rest into a performance metric rather than a natural biological function. Today's sleep culture is characterized by a fundamental contradiction. We know more about sleep than any generation in human history, yet we sleep worse than our ancestors. We have access to the most comfortable beds, the most advanced climate control, the most sophisticated sleep technologies, yet insomnia and sleep disorders are at epidemic levels. The COVID-19 pandemic revealed just how fragile our modern sleep culture has become. The disruption of normal routines, the stress of global uncertainty, and the increased screen time of remote work and virtual socializing created a worldwide sleep crisis. The pandemic also revealed something else. When external pressures were reduced, many people naturally returned to segmented sleep patterns, waking in the middle of the night and finding this perfectly normal and refreshing. This return to ancient patterns during the pandemic suggests that our ancestors' way of sleeping isn't lost, it's just suppressed by modern life. The segmented sleep pattern that served humanity for millennia is still there, waiting to resurface when conditions allow. Modern sleep research has begun to validate many of the practices of our ancestors. The importance of temperature regulation, the benefits of natural light exposure, the value of consistent routines, and even the potential benefits of segmented sleep are all being rediscovered by science. We're learning that our ancestors weren't primitive. In their approach to sleep, they were sophisticated in ways we're only beginning to understand. The future of sleep may involve a return to some ancient principles while embracing beneficial modern technologies. Smart homes that automatically adjust temperature and lighting based on circadian rhythms, wearable devices that monitor sleep without disrupting it, and even genetic therapies that could optimize individual sleep patterns. But perhaps the most important lesson from the history of sleep is this: our modern approach to rest is not the culmination of human evolution, but a deviation from it. The 8-hour sleep schedule, the private bedroom, the expectation of uninterrupted rest, these are recent inventions that may not serve our biological needs as well as the patterns developed over millions of years of human evolution. The story of how we sleep is ultimately the story of how we live. Every change in sleep patterns reflects broader changes in society, technology, and culture. Understanding this history doesn't just help us sleep better, it helps us understand what it means to be human in a world that's constantly changing. The next time you wake up at 3 a.m., don't assume something's wrong. Listen to your body, embrace the quiet darkness, and remember that you're experiencing something that connected you to countless generations of ancestors who found wisdom, intimacy, and peace in the watching hours of the night. Your sleep is not a problem to be solved but a heritage to be honored. Your ancestors knew something we've forgotten, that the quality of our rest determines the quality of our lives, and that sleep is not time stolen from living but the foundation that makes true living possible. Subscribe for more hidden histories that connect us to our deepest human nature. What if I told you that your great-grandmother could predict the future, heal the sick, and communicate with the dead, not through magic, but through something you do every single night? What if the dreams you dismiss as random neurostatic were actually a sophisticated communication system that connected our ancestors to sources of knowledge we've completely forgotten how to access? Right now, as you listen to this, your brain is preparing for tonight's journey into a realm that ancient civilizations considered more real and more important than waking life itself. Every night, you enter a state that your ancestors would recognize as sacred time, when the boundaries between worlds dissolve and the impossible becomes routine. But here's what's terrifying: we've lost the ability to navigate this realm that once provided our species with guidance, healing, innovation, and survival strategies. We've turned the most sophisticated information processing system in human consciousness into entertainment, dismissing as fantasy what our ancestors used as their most reliable source of wisdom. The story of how humanity lost its dream language is the story of how we severed our connection to the deepest parts of ourselves. And tonight, when you close your eyes and surrender to sleep, you'll be entering a battlefield where ancient knowledge fights for survival against modern skepticism, where your dreaming mind struggles to communicate in a language your waking consciousness has forgotten how to speak. Picture the first human to experience what we now call a prophetic dream. 40,000 years ago, in a cave in what is now France, a woman awakens with images burned into her memory: herds of animals moving along specific paths, changes in weather patterns, the faces of people she's never met but somehow knows. This isn't imagination. This is information, processed through channels that modern neuroscience is only beginning to understand. Our earliest ancestors didn't separate dreams from reality because they understood something we've forgotten. Consciousness doesn't stop when we sleep, it transforms. The dreaming mind accesses information differently, processes patterns that the waking mind misses, and makes connections that linear thinking cannot achieve. They called this the spirit journey, the soul's travel, the time when the inner eye opens to see what the outer eye cannot perceive. Archaeological evidence suggests that dream interpretation was humanity's first science. Cave paintings aren't just art, they're dream maps, visual records of nocturnal journeys that guided hunting, migration, and survival decisions. The shamans, the wise women, the tribal elders, they weren't just spiritual leaders. They were dream specialists, trained from childhood to navigate the night realm and return with practical knowledge that kept their people alive. The sophistication of Paleolithic dream culture would astonish modern psychologists. These ancient dreamers developed techniques for controlling their dreams, for asking specific questions and receiving specific answers, for entering shared dream experiences where multiple people could meet and collaborate in the sleep state. They understood lucid dreaming, dream incubation, and what we now call remote viewing, not as supernatural phenomena but as natural human capabilities that required training and practice. But here's what's most remarkable: their dream interpretations were accurate. Not symbolically accurate, not metaphorically meaningful, but literally predictive of future events. Archaeological sites reveal evidence of dream-guided decisions about weather patterns, animal migrations, and resource locations that proved correct with startling frequency. This wasn't coincidence or selective memory. This was information processing at a level that our modern minds struggle to comprehend. The ancient dream system worked because it operated on principles that modern science is rediscovering. During REM sleep, the brain processes vast amounts of sensory data that consciousness ignores during waking hours. It identifies patterns, makes probabilistic calculations, and generates scenarios based on subtle environmental cues that escape conscious attention. What our ancestors called prophecy, we might now call predictive modeling performed by the unconscious mind. As humans developed language, dreams became more complex and more communicative. The first words for dream in ancient languages reveal sophisticated understanding of different types of nocturnal experience. There were words for healing dreams, teaching dreams, warning dreams, visitation dreams, and problem-solving dreams. Each type required different interpretation techniques and served different functions in the community. The development of agriculture transformed dream culture in unexpected ways. Farmers needed to predict weather, growing seasons, and optimal planting times. Their dream systems evolved to provide this information, with elaborate seasonal dream calendars that guided agricultural decisions. The fertility goddesses, the harvest spirits, the weather deities, they weren't just religious concepts. They were dream figures that provided practical farming advice through nocturnal visions. Agricultural dreams were so important that entire civilizations developed around dream-guided farming practices. The Mayan calendar, the Egyptian agricultural festivals, the Celtic seasonal celebrations, all of these were based partly on dream revelations about optimal timing for different activities. The priests and priestesses who managed these systems weren't just religious figures, they were agricultural consultants who used dream information to maximize crop yields and ensure community survival. But agricultural civilization also began to stratify dream interpretation. The ruling classes claimed exclusive access to the most important dreams, while common people were told their nocturnal visions were less significant. This wasn't just social control, it was the beginning of dream illiteracy, as ordinary people lost confidence in their own ability to interpret their nightly experiences. The ancient Mesopotamians created the world's first dream libraries, vast collections of dream records that were studied and analyzed like modern scientific data. The Epic of Gilgamesh isn't just literature, it's a dream manual, containing detailed instructions for interpreting different types of nocturnal visions. Mesopotamian dream interpreters were trained for decades, learning to recognize thousands of dream symbols and their variations. But Mesopotamian dream culture reveals the first major corruption of ancient dream wisdom. Dreams became commercialized, turned into a service that could be bought and sold. Professional dream interpreters replaced the communal dream sharing that had characterized earlier societies. The democratization of dream knowledge gave way to specialization and exclusivity. The Mesopotamian approach to dreams was also the first to emphasize fear over empowerment. Their dream interpretations focused heavily on warnings, threats, and negative possibilities. This represented a fundamental shift from the empowering dream culture of prehistoric societies, where dreams were seen as sources of strength and guidance, to a more anxious approach where dreams were viewed as potential harbingers of doom. Yet Mesopotamian civilization also preserved crucial dream techniques that would otherwise have been lost. Their dream incubation practices, where people slept in temples to receive specific guidance, were sophisticated psychological technologies. They understood that environment, preparation, and intention could influence dream content, and they developed elaborate rituals to optimize the dreaming experience. Ancient Egypt elevated dream interpretation to an art form that has never been equaled. The Egyptians understood dreams as communications from the Neteru, the divine principles that govern natural and supernatural law. But these weren't just religious messages, they were practical instructions for living in harmony with cosmic and natural forces. Egyptian dream interpretation was holistic, considering not just the dream content but the dreamer's physical health, emotional state, social circumstances, and spiritual development. They recognized that the same dream could have completely different meanings for different people, and they developed personalized interpretation techniques that took individual circumstances into account. The Egyptian approach to dreams was also deeply therapeutic. They understood that dreams could diagnose illness before physical symptoms appeared, could reveal the emotional causes of physical problems, and could provide healing guidance that complemented medical treatment. The Egyptian physician priests were trained in dream diagnosis, using nocturnal visions as medical tools. But perhaps most remarkably, the Egyptians developed techniques for programming dreams to solve specific problems. The practice of dream incubation in Egyptian temples was a sophisticated form of sleep learning, where people could request dreams about particular challenges and receive detailed solutions. These weren't random visions, they were targeted problem-solving sessions conducted in altered states of consciousness. Egyptian dream records reveal accurate predictions about political events, natural disasters, and social changes that wouldn't occur for months or years after the dreams. This wasn't lucky guessing. The Egyptian dream system had tapped into information processing capabilities that allowed the unconscious mind to analyze complex social and environmental patterns and generate accurate forecasts about future developments. The decline of Egyptian civilization marked the beginning of dream knowledge going underground. As political power shifted and new religious systems emerged, the sophisticated dream interpretation techniques of the pharaonic period were preserved only in secret schools and mystery traditions. The general population lost access to dream wisdom that had guided human civilization for thousands of years. The ancient Greeks approached dreams with characteristic intellectual rigor, seeking to understand not just what dreams meant but how the dreaming process worked. Greek philosophers developed the first systematic theories about the relationship between dreams and consciousness, exploring questions that modern neuroscience is still investigating. But the Greeks also began the process that would ultimately destroy dream culture, the separation of rational and irrational thought. Plato's division between the world of ideas and the world of appearances relegated dreams to a lower category of experience, less real and less reliable than waking consciousness. This philosophical shift had profound consequences for how Western civilization would understand dreams. Greek dream culture was also influenced by the emergence of individual psychology. While earlier cultures had focused on communal dreaming and shared interpretation, the Greeks began to explore dreams as expressions of individual personality and inner conflict. This was both an advance and a loss. It provided deeper psychological insight but weakened the social functions that dreams had served in earlier societies. The Greek mystery schools preserved more sophisticated dream techniques, including practices for shared dreaming, prophetic vision, and healing through dream work. The Eleusinian mysteries, the Dionysiac festivals, and other secret traditions used dreams as tools for spiritual transformation and practical guidance. But these practices were restricted to initiates, hidden from the general population. Greek medicine, particularly the work of Hippocrates, recognized dreams as diagnostic tools that could reveal information about physical and mental health. The Hippocratic approach to dreams was surprisingly modern, focusing on the dreamer's overall condition rather than just the symbolic content of the vision. This medical approach to dreams provided practical benefits, but also began the process of pathologizing unusual dream experiences. The Roman Empire inherited Greek dream culture but transformed it in characteristically Roman ways. They systematized it, commercialized it, and used it for political purposes. Roman dream interpretation became a tool of statecraft, with professional interpreters serving the needs of politicians and military leaders. Roman dream culture was also shaped by the empire's diversity, incorporating techniques and interpretations from conquered territories. This created a rich but confusing mixture of different dream traditions, often contradictory and sometimes incompatible. The synthesis of different approaches weakened the coherence that had characterized earlier dream systems. The Romans were also the first to use dreams systematically for military purposes. Generals consulted dream interpreters before battles, used nocturnal visions to plan strategy, and even employed dream specialists to demoralize enemies by spreading interpretations of ominous dreams. This militarization of dream interpretation represented another corruption of ancient wisdom. But Roman civilization also preserved and transmitted dream knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. Roman writers like Cicero and Artemidorus created comprehensive dream manuals that documented interpretation techniques from across the known world. These texts became the foundation for medieval and Renaissance dream interpretation. The rise of Christianity marked a catastrophic turning point in dream culture. Early Christian authorities viewed dreams with deep suspicion, seeing them as potential sources of demonic influence or distraction from divine truth. The sophisticated dream interpretation systems that had guided human civilization for millennia were systematically suppressed and destroyed. The Christian attack on dream culture wasn't just religious, it was political. Dreams had always been democratic, available to anyone regardless of social status. A peasant's prophetic dream could challenge the authority of kings and priests. By controlling and limiting dream interpretation, Christian authorities consolidated power and eliminated a potential source of alternative guidance. Yet Christianity couldn't completely suppress dream culture because dreams were too important to human psychological health. The compromise was to restrict legitimate dreams to biblical figures and Christian saints, while treating contemporary dreams as suspect or meaningless. This created a profound split between official Christian doctrine and popular practice, where people continued to use dreams for guidance while officially denying their significance. The medieval period saw dream interpretation go underground, preserved in folk traditions, mystical practices, and alchemical texts. The sophisticated techniques of ancient dream culture were fragmented and hidden, transmitted through secret networks of practitioners who risked persecution for maintaining forbidden knowledge. Medieval dream culture was also influenced by Islamic scholars who had preserved and expanded upon ancient Greek and Persian dream interpretation techniques. The Islamic approach to dreams was more positive than contemporary Christianity, recognizing nocturnal visions as potential communications from divine sources. Islamic dream interpretation became highly sophisticated, developing detailed classification systems and interpretation methods that influenced later European approaches. The medieval period also saw the emergence of dream books, simplified interpretation guides that reduced the complexity of ancient dream wisdom to basic symbol dictionaries. These popular texts made dream interpretation accessible to ordinary people but also diluted and corrupted the sophisticated techniques that had characterized earlier systems. Medieval monastic traditions developed their own approaches to dreams, using nocturnal visions for spiritual guidance while carefully distinguishing between divine, natural, and demonic sources. Monastic dream interpretation was often more psychologically sophisticated than popular approaches, recognizing the role of personal psychology in shaping dream content. The Renaissance brought renewed interest in ancient dream wisdom, but this revival was incomplete and often misunderstood. Renaissance scholars had access to classical texts about dreams but lacked the cultural context and practical training that had made ancient dream interpretation effective. Renaissance dream interpretation became increasingly symbolic and literary, focusing on hidden meanings and allegorical content rather than practical guidance. This approach reflected the Renaissance emphasis on individual psychology and artistic expression but moved further away from the practical applications that had made ancient dream culture valuable for survival and problem-solving. The Renaissance also saw the emergence of dream interpretation as entertainment rather than serious knowledge. Dream books became popular literature, offering simplified interpretations that were more about amusement than genuine guidance. This commercialization and trivialization of dream interpretation represented another step in the degradation of ancient wisdom. Yet Renaissance culture also preserved important elements of dream tradition through art, literature, and hermetic practices. Renaissance artists used dream imagery in their work, poets explored dream themes in their writing, and occult practitioners developed new techniques based on ancient foundations. This cultural preservation kept dream knowledge alive even as its practical applications were being forgotten. The scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries delivered what seemed like a fatal blow to dream interpretation. The new emphasis on empirical observation and rational analysis relegated dreams to the category of superstition, unworthy of serious investigation. The dream wisdom that had guided human civilization for millennia was dismissed as primitive ignorance. But the scientific dismissal of dreams was premature and based on incomplete understanding. The early scientists lacked the tools to investigate the neurological and psychological processes involved in dreaming, so they simply assumed that dreams were meaningless. This assumption would persist for centuries, creating a massive blind spot in human self-understanding. The Enlightenment continued the scientific attack on dream interpretation, promoting rational thought as the only reliable source of knowledge. Enlightenment thinkers viewed dream interpretation as evidence of human irrationality that needed to be overcome through education and scientific thinking. This philosophical shift completed the marginalization of dream culture in Western society. Yet even during the Enlightenment, some thinkers recognized that dreams might contain valuable information. Philosophers like Kant acknowledged that dreams revealed aspects of human psychology that were otherwise hidden, while scientists like Kekule famously credited dreams with providing crucial insights for their discoveries. The 19th century brought the first systematic scientific investigation of dreams, but this research focused primarily on the physiological aspects of sleep rather than the content or meaning of dreams. Scientists were interested in when and why people dreamed but showed little curiosity about what dreams might mean or how they might be useful. The 19th century also saw the decline of folk dream interpretation as urbanization and industrialization destroyed traditional communities. The grandmothers and wise women who had preserved dream knowledge through oral tradition were replaced by doctors and scientists who,